in the essay you wrote for the Reagan Institute on President Reagan's Time for Choosing Speech, you really emphasize poverty and how a country and a society and people ought to respond, what we can do to help those with less. And you just mentioned it now as well. Tell me about kind of how that has been kind of the focus a lot of what you write about and have taught.
That's why I believe that at this particular moment in our country's history, it's more important than ever for us to make sure that our conservative voices are being heard. The country is eager to find solutions to some really complex and difficult problems. How do we lift people out of poverty? How do we resolve the racial divide in our country? How do we win back our economy that was doing so well, but now is, being dismantled? How do we protect our freedoms around the globe from those who would do us harm? And at the end of the day, the answers to all of those and many more problems are, I believe, embedded in what we believe as Reagan conservatives. We know how to improve education gaps in this country. We know what works. We know how to help people come off welfare. So we don't have the option of sitting back and allowing ourselves to be canceled in this moment. The American people are looking for solutions and looking for ideas. And unfortunately, what's happened with the left is they have made an entire cottage industry out of trying to silence our voices. And one of the reasons I speak even louder now than I ever have before is because I know that the values that I was raised with, the values that I had the privilege of working with Ronald Reagan on, are the things that will improve the quality of life for every American and protect our freedom. So we cannot be canceled. We must continue to speak into this moment.
So, wow, I mean, the language of canceled, of course, has been a theme. Headlines today in terms of Dr. Seuss books and the reaction to that from many on the conservative side, pointed as an example of a quote unquote cancel culture. But there is a lot of people, young people in this country, that look at the past, quote unquote, look at their the common sense from the grandmother, to quote you from just a few moments ago, and want to see in that only prejudice, only the imperfections, only the constructs of the past that were not just enough. How do you counter that? Because you certainly engage all the time. You're a thought leader with people who would look at perhaps the imperfections of the past to reject it all.
Well, the first thing I do is go back to my faith-based roots. And one of the things that I know is we are all sinners and fall short. There's not a perfect human being that's ever walked the planet, except maybe one. And so as a result of that, I think you have to contextualize everything, the history. What was going on in the culture at the time? What did we know then? And what are the things that we know now that we didn't know then? And we have to celebrate the good things that people did without, in fact, dismissing all of their contributions, perhaps because of a lack of knowledge, perhaps because of ignorance of things in the moment. I will continue to read the wonderful Dr. Seuss stories to my grandchildren and many of the wonderful lessons that he taught there. And I recognize that our founders were not perfect, but boy, they were really quantum leaps ahead of many of the people of their time and in their day. And so I just abhor this cancel culture that's in our country today. I was just speaking to someone in another interview shortly before this and got the idea for an op-ed that I want to work on, because as a Black conservative who's been at this for almost 40 years, I'm an expert on being canceled. I was canceled from day one in my community and in other communities, because if it's one thing that liberals hate more than a conservative, it's a Black conservative.
Do you mean by that you are canceled more because you are a minority within a minority, or because the majority society, the quote unquote establishment, really didn't want to hear from, as you described yourself, right, Black female conservative?
Liberal America did not want to hear from any African American conservative, because we were going counter to their narrative. And as a result of that, the narrative that was painted about who we are, they tried to put a wedge between us and our own communities.
Right.
And so there were many in the African American leadership community who would not invite us to conferences, would not invite us to the table to speak, would not allow us to offer our ideas about how to solve problems. So I'm coming up with a guide for how to survive cancel culture, because I've had to do it longer than almost anybody in our country.